Hello, greetings from the World Maritime University. Welcome to this new series of the WMU Alumni Webinars, focusing on contemporary maritime education and training topics. My name is Professor Momoko Kitada, Head of Maritime Education and Training at World Maritime University. The Maritime Education and Training series of the WMU Alumni Webinar aims to respond to new challenges and opportunities for various maritime education needs. The third MET webinar will focus on enhancing onboard training. A speaker is Dr. Yusuke Mori, Deputy Executive Director, International Association of Maritime Universities, IAMU, and he's also a Master Mariner. I would now hand over to today's moderator and discussant, WMU Professor Michael Manuel, Vice President Provost.
Thank you very much, Professor Kitada, and really good to note all the interest this webinar has generated. Hearty welcome to everybody. As has been mentioned, this is the third in a series of 3 MET webinars from WMU. And in this particular session, we are focusing on enhancing onboard training. My name is Michael Manuel. I'm the Vice President Provost of WMU. However, in this session, I'm wearing the hat of a Professor of Maritime Education and Training. And it is my extreme pleasure to welcome to this day's interaction, Dr. Yusuke Mori. As has been indicated by Professor Kitada, Dr. Mori is a Master Mariner, recent graduate of WMU, and he currently is the Deputy Executive Director of the International Association of Maritime Universities. He has a background at sea, Master Mariner, as we've indicated, and also has worked extensively in his own doctoral work, addressing the issues around the way states approach onboard training, which is very critical to developing competence for seafaring. So I will invite Dr. Mori now, and he will also take the opportunity to tell us a little bit more about himself, and then we'll proceed with the engagement for today. He will present, and I invite you to ask any questions that you may have in the section provided for this, the chat box. And we will try to answer as many questions as we can. If we cannot do this, the questions will be compiled and answered and then distributed back to you. So I really hope we'll have a very excellent time today and look forward to reading your questions and your comments. So Yusuke, if you can join us now, please, and take us forward.
Thank you, Professor Manuel, for your introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, it was a privilege for me to participate in this webinar and as a presenter and present my research on the onboard training. We are actually currently so-called in the Golden Week. So today is also the national holiday in Japan. But at the same time, today is the day of the beginning of the summer. So it was super nice, fine day today. So it's not suitable for stay at home and to deliver the presentation, but still this event is quite important for me. And it is fortunate, maybe I can see the participants' name, but there is no time to see all the names. But I assume that many friends and my classmates also participating in this webinar. So greetings to all again, once again. So today's topic, as the last part of the webinar series on maritime education and training, is enhancing onboard training. Today's presentation will be outline of the findings, mostly from my PhD study. Again, let me introduce myself. My name is Yusuke Mori. I'm currently serving as a Deputy Executive Director of the International Association of Maritime University, known as IAMU. I graduated from the Tokyo University of Mercantile Marine in 2000, and then became a navigation officer and also instructor on training ships at the Japanese MET institutions. I graduated from WMU in 2014, then assigned to the Port State Control Office in the Ministry of Transport. It is a big surprise for me. And I started this job in 2018, and was assigned as a Deputy Executive Director of WMU. I completed my PhD in November 2025 last year. When I enrolled at the One Maritime University in 2013, it was the time that the Professor Michael Manuel took the role of the head of the MAT. When I finished my PhD study, and he was my supervisor, Professor promoted to the Vice President of One Maritime University. I think his promotion aligns with my academic journey in somehow. Okay, today I will discuss various aspects of Onboard training based on my PhD study in the following orders. Today I intend to finish this presentation in around 20 minutes to 25 minutes to have a sufficient time for interactive discussion, including the Q&A. This presentation is very brief. Of course, I didn't include any of the research approach or research methodologies, but in this 20 minutes, you can see my 4 years journey in my PhD studies in very summary. Okay, seafarers play a significant role in the global trade. The achievement of appropriate level of competency to operate ships safely, efficiently, and environmentally friendly manner in turns heavily relies on the maritime education training systems. In this context, onboard training has been around one of the most important components of the MAT as it provides real-life experience on board. The term onboard training is used in the STCW as covering the approved seagoing service. The minimum length of this onboard training is clearly prescribed as 12 months for the certificate of competencies under Regulation 2.1. However, many approaches have been taken to meet such requirements. For instance, some institutions send their students for the commercial ship at the end of the academic program, while the others, for instance, utilized a dedicated training ship for the training purpose, and then scheduling the onboard training during the academic program. It is also unfortunately true that there has been many issues and challenges in the implementing the onboard training. And the different trend factors such as digitalization, autonomous ships, and introduction of alternative fuels also affect the onboard training. In the proceedings, I will discuss a little bit more details about these aspects. In the practice of onboard training, these issues persist in the contemporary the maritime context. Quality of training due to the lack of appropriate mentoring structures, limited learning opportunities, even the harassment during training, all lead to the insufficient level of quality of onboard training. The MAT institution also have faced a lack of available training berths for their students. A complicated academic program and the schedule at the later stage of the academic program is also main causes of the issues in the training schedule. Insufficient training facilities, the cost of the necessary training, and the influence of the management agencies were also well recognized, identified the MAT institutions as issues. Actually, the issue related to the quality of onboard training and also availability of training berths were recognized in the international maritime communities, in particular at IMO level. Lack of sufficient level of quality of onboard training was raised first at HTW2 in 2015, and these documents were submitted to the IMO regarding the quality of onboard training. Finally, in 2019, the new agenda so-called development of the measures to ensure quality of onboard training as a part of the mandatory seagoing service required by the STCW convention was agreed to be established. Similarly, the issue related to the availability of training berths have been raised by various member states. As indicated, a number of proposals have been submitted to the different sessions of IMO meetings. It's not directly related to the studies or this topic, but I would highly recommend reading the proposal submitted the USA at STW 42. It's highlighted in red in this presentation. I think this paper explicitly illustrates the beauty and fundamental principle of the STCW. Don't worry, this slide will be shared after the webinar, so just, you can read, you can recall the name of the documents afterwards. Anyway, as is illustrated, both issues were well recognized as a significant concerns at IMO for long years. It is obvious that use of the simulators for the purpose of replacing required seagoing service is another hot topic related to onboard training. And during the comprehensive review of the STCW, these documents were submitted to propose amending the relevant regulations. And finally, in February 2026, just 2 months or 3 months before, the HTW 12, the working group or subcommittee agreed that 3 months of the seagoing service can be replaced by the simulator training. Yet the details, for instance, how to, have not yet been discussed. In my view, it would be very, very difficult to determine what kind of the simulator can be regarded as the equivalent to the how long seagoing service. It's very, very challenging from my perspective. And you can see, as of today, there are 3 countries that officially communicate with the IMO about their equivalent arrangement to substitute seagoing service with the simulator training. Okay, then looking into the different onboard training strategies, then there are 5 elements that inform the differences in the onboard training strategies. There are whether onboard training is integrated into the academic program, is the training durations substituted by the other means, or training schedule, and a type of ships for training. These elements informs the different arrangement of onboard training. From the data collected from the 95 maritime education training institutions from 44 countries, it was found that about 81% of the MIT institutions, onboard training is an integral part of academic program. About 60% of the institutions scheduling the onboard training during the academic program, while the 30% of the institutions place onboard training at the end of the academic program. The majority of the institutions use the commercial ship for the cadets training. Notably, however, 20% of the surveyed institutions own their training ships. There are also differences in the interpretations of the required duration of onboard training and how many months of the seagoing service can be substituted by the simulator training. Analyzing these similarities and the differences, this study identified 7 main strategies among the 95 MIT institutions. For instance, type A is a type that onboard training is integrated into the academic program, scheduled at the end of the academic program, and the training is conducted on the commercial ships exclusively. On the other hand, type G, the part of the onboard training is substituted by the simulator training, And onboard training is integrated into academic program, scheduled during the program, but training is conducted on the commercial ships exclusively. So there are 7 main strategies identified from the study. The number on the bottom of the tables indicate the number of the institutions fall under each category. So why they are so different? There are several reasons to choose onboard training strategies. Many raised giving the students a real-life experience is the main reason for choosing the specific onboard training models. And the availability of the training ships is another major reason for choosing the onboard training models. On the other hand, giving a sufficient level of knowledge before onboard training, or smooth implementation of the academic program, and the learning effectiveness are the primary reason for choosing the training schedule. But at the same time, many institutions are forced to place the onboard training at the end of the academic program due to the lack of a training bus or uncertainty in securing the training bus. This is another reality. So there are also various trends and factors that affect onboard training implementations. For instance, the change in the perceptions about the maritime sectors of the young generation affect their willingness to join the maritime academies, which lead to the reduction on the number of new entrants to the institutions. The second factor is the political legal factors. The MET systems, including the onboard training, needs to be approved by the maritime administration. So any of the policy change in the administrations or government may have influence of the onboard training implementation. The next factor is the technological factors, which include the development of the maritime autonomous surface ships and remotely controlled ships. It's obviously that this discussion will lead also the discussion of the demands of the seafarers in the future maritime sectors. And the change in the economic status of the countries may change the number of the students who wish to enroll the maritime institutions. The salary difference will not be so significant between the job on board and the job on shore. Looking at these issues and the factors, and it was found that onboard training should be viewed from a more holistic MET system perspectives. Sometimes we focus only on the onboard training, seagoing service, or simulator training when discussing its effectiveness. Let's look at the discussion at IMO. So all the submission I indicated in the previous the slides were all discussing about how many, what kind of the simulator can replace, how many seagoing service, or how we can improve the availability of a training bus. But they are completely forgetting about this holistic system of institutions. Onboard training lives in the quite complex context. It is influenced by the different external factors, as I indicated, which are sometimes beyond the control of the MET institutions. That's why it is quite important to look at onboard training as a part of holistic MET system when we consider to improve its practice. When we look at the onboard training from a theoretical point of view, then we can define the onboard training as indicated. An expression of the career-related apprenticeship in the maritime industry, where an individual is immersed in the learning process situated in the operational reality of the community of practice, exhibiting a high degree of materiality, and where the individual learning, while being self-driven, is framed by the influence of more knowledgeable others. Mentoring structures and institutional support that together facilitate the movement of the novice from the periphery of the COP to its core through the acquisition of the continuous development of relevant positive knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Attitudes here is quite important. This definition was drawn from the systematic literature review in the initial stage of my study. Okay, through data analysis from the 48 semi-structured interviews and the 10 focus groups with the 97 seafarers and students, elements that inform effective onboard training are identified as mentoring structures, real-life experiences, training experiences, training schedule, and the simulator trainings. Meanwhile, in order to identify the ideal model which are currently practiced at the AIMIT institutions, I employ the TOPSIS analysis. So this right figure is the result of the TOPSIS analysis. From this statistical analysis, type F, which is type F, yes, which is onboard training is partially substituted by the simulator. And the schedule during the academic program, training is conducted on training ships and commercial ship, was ranked as the most ideal model against a given criteria. Then what has been done was then the 5 elements which are illustrated in the previous slide is examined by the theoretical learning theories. So in this figure, the 5 elements stated in the previous slide can be explained well in terms of why they are so important from the learning theories. The 5 circles, colored black, the circle, these 5 circles, represent the elements that inform effective onboard training. Circles around each element linked with the same colored line highlight the key considerations that inform each element. And the color field at the circle around the corner represent the relevant learning theories. The colored lines drawn from these learning theories illustrated the link between the learning theory to the key considerations. Okay, then appropriate the schedule. This appropriate training schedule provides the catalyst to bridge theoretical knowledge into practice, and as a result, which motivate the students. This can be well explained from the adult learning perspectives. The importance of the appropriate mentoring structures is simply obvious. All cited learning theories here, cognitive apprenticeships, experiential learning, and onboard professional development highlight its significance of existence of more knowledgeable others, or mentors, or experiences others, for the successful application of those learning theories. Then the real exposure at life at sea is another key, the important element. It is obvious that real life situated nature of the learning environment in the professional seafarer community of practice fosters learning of the students. The experience of the training ships is also a necessary element for improving onboard training. The existence of dedicated training instructors or reflective active practice are the simply necessary components for the experiential learning and also cognitive apprenticeships. And finally, the role of the simulator and structural training program, and also the process of this instructional model, starting from the briefing and the exercises, debriefing. This mirrors exactly precisely the experiential learning cycles. So those learning theories will explain why these 5 elements are such important for improving the onboard training. Then finally, this is the best model of onboard training, statistical theory informed and expert input model. so-called stay model. So in this model, it suggests that onboard training should be scheduled during the academic program, which allows bridging theoretical knowledge into practice and early exposure to the real world at sea. While the simulator training should be incorporated within the program with the full application of the experiential learning with the high materiality that would also improve the learning effectiveness. The first onboard training to be conducted on a dedicated training ships or available resources with a dedicated training instructor who are more knowledgeable others on board, which provide proper support, guidance, and also reflective activities. The latter part of the training should be provided on a commercial ship. Real exposure in the professional seafarer community of the practice allows cadets to gain necessary skills and knowledge, and importantly, the attitude within the community. Again, for improving onboard training, this would be the best model. Training ship or available resources, training instructors should be present to provide educational mental support for their initial stage of training. In the latter part, the students should be exposed to the real life experiences, environment, and appropriate schedule and the structured simulator training allow students to bridge theory into practice. These ensured all the necessary elements for improving onboard training practice to be competent seafarers. Of course, you can access my dissertation through the link indicated in this slide, free of charge. Thank you very much for your kind attention. I completed sometimes 25 minutes. Thank you very much for your time and your participation and interest.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mori. I think that captures quite succinctly the work that you have done for the doctoral degree. I see that we have really a lot of alumni and lots of interest. I recognize many names, so let me thank you again, alumni, for joining, and all the others as well. I hope you found this topic engaging as well. But Yusuke, we have some questions that we will run by you. Some of it you will have to draw from your wider experience, and some, I guess, also from your work. So the first question is from Captain Karim from MSCA class of 2025, I believe, from Egypt. And he asks, what are your insights about the gap between institutional training and onboard training? So in part, this is the problem that you sought to address. At the moment, as you view the landscape of shipping and MET, what are the gaps you think is existing between what happens in institutions and what happens on board?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael, and also thank you, Karim, for your questions. I think it's quite important questions for the way forward. What I see, of course, from my research and also, as a deputy executive director, I have an opportunity to visit several or many of the different MET institutions in the world, in the different places. So one of the problem or gaps I can see in the current practice is something like the gap in the understanding of the importance of the training and also the expectation from the MET institution is not sometimes being met by the training provider. So I think that's why I mentioned in the previous slide. So there is very complex, the onboard training is a complex issue. It's not only for the issue for the MET institutions, but it's also they have an influence from the shipping companies or training provider, let's say. So if the shipping companies think that training is quite important for the student skill development, then there is no gap between the MET institution and the onboard training especially on the commercial ship side. But the problem is sometimes the shipping companies doesn't so much care about the training quality. That's why many, because my research are basically, data collected from the MIT institutions. It's not, data collected from the shipping companies. So many of the MIT institutions clearly stated that there is some issues because they cannot do anything about to improve the quality of onboard training. Some institutions have some institutional support system that like monitoring the training progress, but it's not sufficient to ensure the quality of onboard training. So that I can see some of the gaps between the institution and also the current onboard training practice.
Thank you. I think that's very insightful. And Karim, I think there are a lot of gaps, as has been said. It's more related to the gaps for communication between the institutions and the commercial, the industry as such. Also a bit of a legal lacuna, a legal loop, because that jurisdictional control that comes from a flag state is not the same as the one that comes from a certificate issuing jurisdiction. So there are some gaps here. I think we can expand on it more when we send answers to these questions. There's another one, Yusuke, from Johanna Solozano, who is from, if I remember correctly, maybe class of 2017. She did SML, but then she went back to Honduras and had to work with STCW quite a lot. And she's asking Dr. Mori, how do you think artificial intelligence is affecting or will affect maybe or impact maritime training strategies? So this is a little bit broader than just onboard training. And given your background and the complexity of the universities you have to interact with in your current role, what insights do you have on the role that artificial intelligence is playing in training broadly? And maybe more specifically onboard training, if you can think of that.
Yeah, thank you very much. So it also got good questions. It's a very hot topic for not only the maritime education training, but educational context in the global. So, and also it's a good topic for us to have, because maybe the first this webinar series on the first one was AI in the maritime education training. So I really enjoyed to seeing the slides which provided by the presenter. But with regard to the AI, of course, maybe I should answer more broad view. Of course, it's a very much big effect, influence for the maritime education training. But maybe we can think positively on the introduction of the AI in a good manner. So, I mean, for instance, what is the benefit to using the AI? So sometimes it's very useful for the research for like to searching something, and it's also helpful for structure the program for individual learner. So maybe in the future, more learning in the context of the maritime education training institutions is more like an individual basis, so that AI can suggest what kind of the training program or educational program is suitable or fit for this specific person. And then, because sometimes, for instance, like, let's say, okay, let's one subject, okay, navigational equipment, one subject. So basically, it's a very historical practice. So the teacher coming to the class and they deliver the one lecture to everyone. But it's sometimes, the students' difference in the understanding is completely somehow different. In such case, maybe AI can provide like a suggested training program for the individual specific learners, so that student or teacher can, use the specific learning tools for, this specific person.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sometimes it's not so effective because you need to deliver, similar kind of the things one by one, but still, sometimes it's very, very effective. So my view is something like, I think it's quite positively for the introduction of AI in the maritime education training. So it's more like giving a specific program for the specific person. So.
Thank you. Yusuke, maybe I can ask you to stop sharing your screen so we can, see you better. Yes, I think that the alumni in particular may be interested to know that WMU has responded to this AI thing. Our view is not to prohibit AI, just as Yusuke has been saying, it is to recognize the complementarity that it brings and also to deal with issues around integrity in its use. So we do have some kind of sliding scale for assessments. For instance, there are assessments where AI cannot be used, and the assessments that may require the mandatory use of AI. So that recognition as a tool. But Johanna, you are very right. I think this is some topic that will engage with all of us quite significantly well into the future. And I believe the recordings for the very first webinar are available, so you can go back to that and have a look at that as well. We also have a question, Yusuke, from Altef Rehman, class of 2007, I think, who now is in the Saudi Arabia KSA. And he's asking, what are your opinions about the importance of the C training record book and also its the feasibility of having it in digital format?
Yeah, thank you very much. Before before delivering my answer, I remember that the Professor Michael Mania has a significant good knowledge or good memory. So 5 days after the enrollment of the students, he remembered all the names of the students. So it's a super good memory you have. So yeah, I think the training record book is another important components for or potential components for which potentially improve the onboard training practice. Let's explain our one practice. Actually, already the one good example in one specific jurisdictions. This country already transformed the written training record book to the digital format. But this digital format can be accessed by the many different stakeholders, like MET institutions, shipping companies, or even government administrations can access to the digital training record book. So what is the benefit of having this shared digital training record book? So again, maybe in the first the Q&A, I mentioned that there is some gaps between the institution and also shipping companies. So if the MET institution can monitor closely the progress of the students in the training, for instance, what kind of the duties has been done, what kind of the duty has remaining, then MET institution can actually, of course, first maybe suggest the students through the digital training record book, or even the institution can contact the shipping companies which providing the onboard training practice. So I think the digital or training record book is another tools for improving onboard training.
Thank you very much. Just a quick point about my memory. I'm getting older, so I don't remember too well. So it's not the same. We have a question from Elio, who I think you remember, class of 2025.
Yes.
And Elio asked, onboard training often focuses on technical tasks. How can we better prepare cadets for the psychological challenges of life at sea, such as isolation, fatigue, and cross-cultural dynamics without overburdening ship's officers?
Video. It's super nice questions. Yeah. Again, it's kind of the advertisement, so you can access to my PhD dissertation anytime. But your question is quite pointing with a very nice point, because yeah, maybe many people again. It's also discussed in the previous slide. So people sometimes forgetting about this holistic. The onboard training is living in the holistic MET systems. So we should not forget about this theoretical part, like 4 years of academic educational duration in in the institutions. Also, we have simulator training. We also have a practical training. So my master dissertation was all about leadership training in MET institutions. So I remember there are so many different approach has been taken among the different MET institutions for the leadership training. Let's say in Japan, leadership education is kind of the 4 years program. So it's always having like a leadership training. It's not so explicitly illustrated, but we see that this 4 years program is a leadership training. But most of the people after introduction of the leadership training in the SDCW, developed like a 2 weeks training program. This is a leadership training. 2 weeks. 2 weeks, after 2 weeks, you have some kind of good leaderships. No, it's not possible. So I think it's also true that onboard training is somehow the process of the individual learner develop their skills and knowledge, but these skills and knowledge is not only provided by this during the onboard training. The skills and knowledge also developed during the academic program. But what is important on this real life experience on board is, from my understanding, is kind of the soft skill. Let's say discipline, how we keep how it is important to keep the time. It should be the important to be a punctuality, for instance. This is the reality of the seafarers. And how to walk on the deck, how to go downstairs, go upstairs in the heavy, harsh weather. So those kind of the very, very fundamental skill, not skill, like identity. Yeah. Identity to be a seafarer can be or should be developed during this onboard training. Because many people, again, it's a discussion at IMO, but many people forget about why 12 months is necessary. Why 3 months can be replaced by the simulator. There is no discussion about why we need a 12 months. But from my understanding and based on my knowledge, I think these 12 months provide the identity, allow students to develop their identity as a seafarers. I even remember myself, what was my 12 months of training on the training ship. It was like always education and also teaching how to behave or how to be a seafarer. What is the seafarer looks like. So those kind of things have to be developed during the onboard training. So, but most of the knowledge and skills. So again, we should consider about more holistic MET system, including onboard training, academic program, MET onboard training, even the simulator. So then we can maybe, more sharing the more best part of this development. So maybe again, in my final conclusion, like the first 12 months has to be the training ship or available resources. And during this time, well supported by the instructors or guidance or more knowledgeable others, students can overcome or can know or learn how to manage seasickness, homesickness, all those kind of things. But the latter part has to be on the commercial ship to be exposure on the real life experience. It's more effective for you.
Thank you. That's a very comprehensive and good answer, Yusuke. I do, and seeing that we have a lot of key people in the maritime industry on this webinar, and I really appreciate their standing. I've been looking through some of your introductions, really pleased that you could all join us. There's another angle of this that I just want to chip in, given the profile of people we have here. We do want to train seafarers, and Elio, because you specifically mentioned fatigue, specifically fatigue and also isolation. So we do want seafarers to be resilient in this context, but we have to often think about this whole ship operation as a whole system. So we together, beyond MET, we also have to look at optimizing this system. We don't necessarily have to always think about how to create these superhumans who will fight fatigue. They are human. The system itself should adapt so they don't need to be so fatigued. Whilst the resilience has its place in training, it has to be complemented by system optimization. So there's something for us to put on the table when we are having these discussions. Yusuke, we have another question from Ghazali Hamza Ibrahim, and he says, how can maritime institutions and shipping companies effectively integrate digital tools and real-life onboard mentorship to enhance competency-based training without compromising safety standards? I guess this comes back to this balance between digitization and practical identification of a seafaring culture.
Yeah, that's also a good question because maybe I intentionally do not include such aspect in my PhD dissertation. It's also, the big potential for improving onboard training. But again, likewise, I said introduced the digital training record book. So, and I don't remember in such system, but I think the institutional support is another way for improving onboard training. So if you have a digital tools, maybe some institutions already have such kind of the system because most of the institutions have kind of onboard training monitoring or onboard training officers or something like this. Then he or she can maybe help the students the progression of the study or learning through the digital tools. But of course, from the institution, yeah. And also maybe there are some tools for like a self learning system, like, but video tell in the past there are the video tell or something like this kind of the digital tools available. But again, I think the most important components here for the individual learner in the current practice is what students need to learn during this onboard training program has to be is something like mental strength, so and also some kind of the identity of as a seafarers, so that because again it's not so much. Of course, I always thinking about how we can improve the effectiveness of onboard training. But at some point, I noticed that I realized that it's not necessary to be a perfect place for the learning, because it's not classroom. It's not the classroom. It's not the simulator training. So we can do some different ways in the academic program, but onboard training in particular, it's to more like real life exposure, real life experiences, and living in the professional community of practice. And the learnings occurs naturally if or he or she, the cadets, place themselves into the professional community. So, because situated learning is quite a new perspective for the learning theories, but that brings me a lot of new insights about onboard training. So it's not necessary to be like a lecture, or it's not necessary to be a more instructional design. But if the students or cadets can place themselves on the real professional seafarer community, where this community allows these students to come in, and then the learning is naturally happening. So of course, digital tool is very useful, but in the same time, maybe we can somehow introduce this shared learning perspective in the shipping companies. Then there is no so many administrative burden for the shipping companies to do something.
Yeah.
So that's my thought.
And taking off from that premise where they are coming into a community of practice, and that's the real value that onboard training vis-a-vis simulation, for instance, would bring. We have a question here that links to that, a very important question. And I recall you touched very briefly on this in your PhD work. It's anonymous, but very important. It says that companies are exploiting cadets on board. So instead of this assimilation professionally that forms this correct movement from the periphery to the center of the community of practice, you are actually having what may be extremely called abuse. So the seafarers are treated, they're exploited, they are just extra, the cadets, they are just extra labor. What are your thoughts on this? I know you touched on this very briefly in your work here.
Yeah, thank you very much for your questions. I think it's also very, very important and also very hot topic in the current time of discussion. Well, again, in the part of the onboard training, so maybe my answer is quite similar in the previous Q&A. But simulator training also have a significant benefit for improving the skills and the skills and the knowledge in the maritime education system. So I think maybe we should consider what is the strengths of each training program or each program, each training components or each training tools, let's say. Because the simulator cannot create such a professional community of practice. That's only happened during the real life experience on board. But simulator can can create many different environment and also different ship subtypes and the different scenario and in accordance with the level of knowledge of the students. So now, actually, it's not a PhD program, but this association tries to collect the data how different institutions are, using the simulator in the different ways. But from my understanding or from my knowledge, so most of the MAT institution, at least our member university, already have make a simulator training as a mandatory part. So that means, they can all see that simulator training is very beneficial and also very useful. So, but it's a very different the ways of using the simulator training. So some institutions like, from the first year or second year studies, like a sequential instruction design was placed on there. But some institutions only schedule the simulator training at the third stage or fourth stage of the study. So there is some difference between among even our member universities. So that way, maybe they also think about how we can effectively use the simulator in a different level of the students. So again, maybe my answer is going a little bit, fly away, but my view is like the simulator is a simulator. Onboard training is onboard training. So we should think about the both benefit from the instrument.
I think that's a very insightful answer around simulation. There was one point, though, in the question that I wanted to draw your attention to. We just have a few minutes, so maybe a quick answer so I can take one more important question. The question was alluding to the exploitation of cadets. So they join for onboard training, and then they are exploited as just extra labor. So those were some thoughts on that as well.
Well, yeah, that's somehow I really wanted to change, but I think it's a very complex issue. So it's not simple and also easy to solve that problem. Even like the country jurisdiction, which, for instance, Japan also have implementing this policy, but it's a tax relaxation policy. So if the ships had a cadet, then this ship or this shipping company have some kind of the tax relaxation. But even such, they're taking the benefit from the policy, but it's all depend on the crew on board. So even the shipping company has a strong policy to educate the seafarers or students for good level, but still there is some difficulty to keep the certain quality of onboard training. So basically I want to change somehow, but again, it's not so big deal. So even though the cadets are are doing as a external or additional workforce, but still, if he or she can join the community to practice, then there is something to learn. So basically, my thought is always something like this. So it's very difficult for us to change the situation immediately. But if we introduce the perspective of the situated learning in the shipping companies or practice, then it's a little bit, have a potential to improve those practice, I believe.
Yeah, that's really important, I think. I also think that linking to our earlier discussion around the training record books, particularly when it's digital and it's assessed by a number of stakeholders, this would also help to ensure that the cadet is involved on things that are regulated under, or at least monitored under the training record book. We have just a short time left, so I'd like you to just briefly answer this last question. Your model is a very nice model, but as you have indicated in your way, it's an ideal model, a model that allows for having exposure on training ships and an industry and simulator, and these things are not cheap. how do you address the issue of cost when it comes to seafarer onboard training for cadetship?
Thank you very much. It's another core point of my PhD study. So, yeah, because yes, so my model is ideal, but it's also supported from the learning theories and also expert input. So it's not simple. I just at the end of the day, so I say, oh, this is the best model. No, it's a deep analysis behind the model. So again, you can access to the PhD dissertation to see all the discussion to leading my conclusion. But for instance, like the statistical part of this model is informed from the top-6 analysis, which is input from the 25 experts. So which one is the most ideal model against a given criteria? So this is a kind of the statistical analysis result. Then type F was identified as number 1. And I also, asked the participant what element that can inform the effective onboard training, and the 5 elements can be found.
Yeah.
So actually, this is a practical. That's why as I have said, that training, the initial part of onboard training has to be on training ship or available resources. So I know some institutions already have such policy, like some 1 week onboard training on the ocean tug, 1 week onboard training on the small training ship. Those kind of is another way of improving this initial part of onboard training. So of course I know as a training instructor of a training ship, the training ship is extremely expensive. But for instance, if I look at one jurisdictions which built 5 brand new training ship, this training ship is actually multi-purpose. So for instance, the disaster recovery also sometimes it can be the hospital ship. So I think it's another way of having such training ship. Also, one jurisdiction, there are some shared training ship among the different MIT institutions. It's another way of doing. So there are several ways of doing in such a way. So
okay, that's excellent. Thank you so much. We have really good comments. I have put use case link, the link to use case PhD as well. I've put it again. I just put it again in the chat. You can click on it. It goes to Commons. And there you have use case dissertation, but you have also many other things from WMU. It's been wonderful to listen to you, Ske. Thank you so much. I know firsthand that he has a very complex job now. The IAMU has 83 universities at the moment, the best maritime universities in the world, and USK is in a very privileged position, very stressful but privileged. And I know that maybe in another forum we can get to know how his learnings and experience from WMU have helped him in this rather complex job. I see many more questions and a lot of interesting comments in the chat. I think we will answer the questions and in due course send them back to all the participants, but also we will try to maybe make the chat available to all of you so you can also reflect on your own contribution. So thank you very much. WMU continues to have a lot of webinars. I see a question about when the next webinar will happen. Keep an eye on our platforms. This brings an end to the MET part. I believe Dr. Kitada will talk about it, but there are many more webinars that will come up. So just keep an eye and my colleagues will update you. Thank you, Yusuke. Thank you once again. And I hand over now to Professor Kitada.
Thank you, Dr. Mori and Professor Manuel, for this very interesting and engaging third session of the MET webinar series. All the webinar recordings are available to watch from the WMU headquarters YouTube channel. And once again, thank you very much for your participations, very active participation, and see you at the future webinars or any other events. And thank you very much, and goodbye.